Welcome back to the next edition of Streamtime Sports. I'm your host, Nick Meacham, and thrilled to be back and joined by a colleague of mine, Tom Bassam, who I had the pleasure of seeing not only on this call today, but indeed just a few weeks ago at our New York event. Great to see you, Tom. Obviously, we've got a lot to dig into from the New York experience. How did you find your time out in New York, both from a personal perspective as well as from the conference side?
From the conference side, it was great being like in Manhattan. That was a really nice. That was sort of, you really felt like you were right in the heart of the city. Like me and Dan Jessup went on a couple of nice runs around Central Park. Lovely little jog along the Hudson as well. Always great to be in New York. It still staggers me every time I go how big everything is. Like portions, people, buildings. It's all just like a kind of it's a bit like a film set. It is a film set. You're walking around a film set, the conference itself, I mean, like a really great agenda this year, I thought. Pats on the back to my former SportsPro podcast co-host George Breer for putting that together, and Will Tubbs too. I thought they did a really good job of getting some fascinating industry names. Nick, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, look, well, firstly, if you didn't pick up on that, then Tom's dulcet tones, he is indeed the key host on the SportsPro podcast. So I was trying to just get your voice on the airways first to see if people pick up on that, Tom. But no, look.
We're going to go there. The last time I was on this podcast, Nick, I believe that me and George may have defeated you in a debate. But we'll have to check.
Podcasts have a short lifespan, short memory, I think, from definitely podcast hosts do anyway. No, but good to have you back on, Tom. No, I thought, I think New York just generally after being, 4 months over here in Jamaica now was a pretty big sensory overload for me, who's someone who basically doesn't walk around the streets at all in Jamaica, to now walking around the streets of Manhattan, seeing every type of person imaginable in every state imaginable with buildings, monolithic buildings, just shadowing down on us all. And also just the temperature really caught me off guard. I realized that when I moved to Jamaica, I hadn't taken into the fact that I might travel outside of Jamaica sometimes and didn't have a jacket that I had to go with layers of hoodies and jumpers to keep myself warm when it was, I don't know, it was like a couple of degrees Celsius at one stage. So, I definitely got caught out there. But no, New York's a great city. There's so much activity. The sports industry, really, in the US. I mean, obviously, the US is such a big market, but particularly sports media, it is really all housed in Manhattan. I mean, walking just from our hotel to the main venue, you walk past half a dozen of the biggest sports media companies in the world just casually. It's a pretty big and eye-opening experience. So really good to be there on the ground. And actually, we've got a chance to check out some ice hockey on the ground. So big shout out.
Yeah, I had to go all the way to Jersey for that though. But thank you very much to the Devils. That was a great experience.
You know what? It was pretty quick though to get out there. It wasn't too shabby actually. From Manhattan, it was only 20 minutes or so on the train, which that does really open up my eyes, because I kind of had in my mindset that it was a bit of a hike, but it really was pretty straightforward for us, which was good.
Yeah, fun game to go to for sure.
Right, but we have lots to dig into, as I sort of alluded to earlier. We wanted to talk about some of the big trends that we heard and talked about through the event, and perhaps some sound bites that we took through the conversations both you and I had, Tom, on the ground and on stage, or backstage in some instances. But I mean, for me, Tom, the couple of the key trends and talking points that I was hearing a lot more than I did in previous years is really a big focus on, well, there's two layers to this, I'd say. One is that I really took from all the conversation I had, and I talked with NBC, Fox, YouTube, all the major kind of platforms you could think of were not only there and on stage, ESPN, etc. All the approaches they have around business, the business models and the monetization are still pretty bog standard in my view. It is a subscription business, or it's an advertising business, or maybe it's a hybrid business. The only thing that sort of became more prominent for me was just there's more priority around advertising, and how younger fans don't really care about watching ads, as in they're okay with it if they get their stuff for free. And I mean, that's not a surprise these days. We've had that covered a lot from the various data points we've talked about on this podcast and indeed across our various channels across SportsPro Media and SportsPro Plus and through our partners at Ampere Analysis have provided, but more the focus on how not only that advertising is a viable means now for live sports, but indeed there's more ways to do it, and the revenue is becoming pretty significant. And that was quite an interesting thing just to hear people talk about more about advertising than ever, about the way the platforms can have ads served in various ways, pretty natively without really impacting the fan experience. It just feels like that might be a new area that much of the industry is going to be focused more and more on, is how do you deliver more advertising basically into a live sports experience and without cannibalizing and impacting things. I think perhaps we've been too cautious as an industry for too long about that.
Yeah, I think, well, the US is always much more focused on that advertising load. I actually think that if you were to try and apply those same models in Europe, it wouldn't work. The consumer would react in a completely different way, and there would be a lot of pushback. Especially if you're, say, a pay TV subscriber. This is just really talking through myself, but like similarly with other people I speak to in the industry, colleagues, friends, if there's you notice if there's an increased ad load, especially if you're watching on a pay TV channel already, you're sort of like, what am I paying for if I'm still going to be served with ads anyway? Whereas in the US, that conversation is completely different. It's baked in a way that's completely different. And it means that the industry, as you said, can behave in a different way and plan in a different way. They can, as you said, find different ways to serve advertising because people, frankly, are just a bit more used to it.
I think some of the examples that I took away with that, I do think there's certain sports that obviously really are built for ads to play a key role. And, the NFL obviously is a great example where it stop-starts every play. And that's where I think that sports has had a bit of a challenge, is how do you bring ads into that without having to rebuild the entire, whether it's tech stack, whether it's the ability to create that content. So some pretty cool platforms and techs I saw, like Transmit Live, who was one of our partners for the event, but indeed, I think I might be actually doing a podcast with them soon, hopefully, because they do some great work with companies like Paramount and the like, where they bring those. It can be very subtle ads. You've seen them on the US TV for quite some time, but they haven't made it into the streaming landscape to the same level. So look, hopefully my view is that hopefully we, as a consumer, yes, we need to be making sure we're not overusing or abusing the relationship and by overfeeding ads to people who are paying a premium for those rights. But equally, if the ads are allowed to, provide a way to reduce the costs of those rights, because everyone has spent, particularly markets like the US, are spending a truckload on those rights and ultimately are struggling to drive revenue from it, and it helps to keep the cost down or from continuing to go up, let's say, then that is a bit of a win. So, but anyway, I just thought that was an interesting thing for me to keep hearing more examples of way advertising is being brought to the fore, and perhaps what the next step will be is that you can actually see more of those, let's say, those sports properties that have tried the subscription model, the gated paywall approach, and have struggled to get scale. Hey, maybe there is a playbook here around advertising that might work for some of them, which actually is a nice little segue into one of the other things I was talked about on stage was piracy. That obviously subscriptions is one of the main blockers for why people are going to pirated platforms. And for anyone that may have been across pirated content before, hypothetically speaking, they love to serve ads and pop-ups in those environments quite a lot. So I think it shows that people are willing to if they can get it for free. And actually, we had on stage Joe Markowski, who was the CEO of DAZN North America at the time when he spoke on stage. And I literally think that afternoon or the next day, he officially posted it on his LinkedIn or the group CEO did, that he's now stepping down from that role. But he was on stage with the guys from Odetto, and they were talking about the fact that the loss of revenue is something like 28 to $30 billion of revenue is lost each year. And compare that to the 55 billion of total media rights spend per year. It's just an crazy number to think of that sort of revenue not being filtered into those broadcasters and platforms that are sitting on those rights. And Joe's point was kind of a call to arms about the fact that, hey, as an industry, we need to do something about all this, because piracy is not being mitigated. And there's no special sauce here to sort of solve this problem. So I'm just curious, Tom, what's your take, I guess, more widely about that conversation about the cost and impact that, say, something like piracy has had on the industry. do you think it's something that, from the conversations you've had, that piracy needs to be taken more seriously across the industry, or other people I've talked to in the US sports media landscape just see it as kind of like it's just a loss. It's just what was the term we had a couple of years ago at an event? It was just like there's a term at supermarkets where it's like basically
it's like a written down cost or something like that. Like a
it's a write off. So basically, you write off a percentage
of
your stock. Yeah, basically you write off a percentage of your stock each time you deliver something, and this is just part of the piracy. So, what's your take on all that?
I think those numbers are, you wouldn't ever get a like for like. Like you're not going to suddenly assume all of that revenue, or all of that revenue that's lost to piracy. You're not going to get that back, in total. You may be able to get some of it back, but so to say that this is all the money that's being left on the table, and that this are the potential levels that we could go to, I don't think that's quite accurate. I don't think that's strictly true. It's nice to say, it's a nice figure to aim for, I think, but I think there will always be an element of that you are going to have to write off. Like there will be theft in any kind of industry, regardless of what it is, and that is a percentage of it. I guess, the hard work is going to be to reduce it. Struggle with that, I think, again, it goes back to, we were talking about previously with advertising, like people are not just happy to sit through adverts on sports content that they're getting legally, they're happy to sit through adverts that they're getting illegally too. I mean, someone will sit there and literally click through 5 pop-ups and close 1 million different ads for shady websites and dodgy betting sites and all of this kind of stuff, in order to watch something without having to pay for it. Like, people will go through a lot more than you think in order to watch something. Like, not speaking from personal experience or anything, but it is like you will put yourself through a really crap user experience in order to get something for free, if that's the way that you get it. And how you mitigate that and how you completely get rid of it, I don't really know the answer to. Some of the answers in the industry about advertising apply to both sides of the coin. I would love to know. I'd love to go to a conference full of or go to an event where you get a real detailed look at the advertisers that do use those piracy services and how much they're able to generate out of it. I think that'd be absolutely fascinating. Maybe that's a bit of an insight into myself that I didn't want to reveal too much.
I would love to see we could get some of those guys on stage and give their take on things. That'd be quite a fun conversation to have. We'd like to do some of those debate sessions we've done on stage a couple of times, Tom, and apparently one that we may or may not have won or lost. But maybe we'll bring those guys in and see if they can win the debate about why those pirated platforms are of value to the user. But in all seriousness, though, I think one thing I took away from the session, I've heard Joe speak at a number of our events before, and indeed, he's a bit of a thought leader around this space for some time, and also about the need for the industry and indeed the business models to change. And there's a couple of minutes in that session that he frames it all really well. So I might hand it over just to Joe to just talk through some of those points and really how big the problem is for the industry and indeed for companies like DAZN.
To put it in sort of numerical terms, in terms of percentage of audience that is potentially on sort of pirate platforms rather than legal platforms, I think DAZN, and particularly the business I've run, DAZN North America, which is a big boxing business, pay-per-view boxing business, particularly even further, the celebrity boxing stuff we do to a younger audience, right? Yeah. You're talking about a $50, $60, sometimes $80 product on top of a subscription. So I think in terms of being at the coalface of the revenue leakage, there isn't a job in the world, unfortunately for me, apart from mine, that's more exposed to piracy. And I look at this and think, well, you've got a younger generation who've grown up with the internet since they were sort of awake as human beings, now coming into households, making buying decisions. They are wired to not have to pay for content. They don't, but a lot of people in this room will have kids of this age. They don't expect to pay for content. They're also extremely savvy at navigating the internet. So the problem currently, and I look at it from a broadcast perspective, there are other industry impacts, as Rodrigo's spoken to. If the problem is currently $28 or $30 billion, that $71 billion number I referenced for the wider entertainment industry is forecast to go to about 130 billion in 2028. I think the incoming generation, who are also sort of battling for their attention anyway from other entertainment formats that they've grown up with, the ones you actually do get hooked on sport, are they even going to want to pay for it? And if that number goes from 30 to, let's say, 60, 70, you're talking about more revenue leakage than the industry currently generates from rights sales globally. And at that point, that's an industry sort of catastrophic situation. And I worry that not enough attention at the top of a lot of big relevant media companies is being given to this. I think it's a kind of convenient thing to not talk about and sort of bury your head in the sand and not, because with all due respect, I don't think the solutions in the industry right now are really giving people like DAZN, groups like DAZN, the adequate tools to fight back. They're definitely helping, but I don't think they're really denting. The pirates seem to be getting more and more sophisticated in their ability to hack and then distribute. I would really like to see more meaningful investment of resources and brain power, frankly, into more collective action in the industry, because I really do think it's going to start killing off broadcast businesses who can't, frankly, generate the revenues to keep paying the rights fees. The second wave is going to be the rights holders, and you're starting to see rights fees, particularly outside of North America, plateau or go down in real terms. That's because broadcasters can't monetize the content as well as they'd like to. Piracy is the biggest contribution to that. So rights holders get hit second wave. There's also a bunch of sort of more ancillary issues, like the fact that most of these pirate platforms are run by organized crime. So there's a whole load of industry and societal effects that I think really do need more attention. And frankly, I'm just trying to use our DAZN platform to try and bring more attention to that.
It kind of sounds like if we had a planet that was just dedicated to sports, it would be on fire right now.
Let's not get into climate change. That's above my pay grade. But I think this is I call it a tsunami. I think it's really the biggest issue in sport and media, and I don't think it's given that respect, frankly.
Right. So, good to hear that from Joe, and hopefully we're interested to see where he pops up next now that he's stepped away from that CEO role at DAZN, and indeed just what's next for DAZN. They seem to be making moves left, right, and centre. But look, let's keep things moving and go to a conversation that you had, Tom, and indeed someone I actually also spoke to on stage as part of a kickoff session, which was actually very last minute as our moderator had to drop out. But that's with Seth Bacon. You spoke to Seth in the studio where we produced some content around some of their approach. So talk us through what you talked about with Seth and what your key takeaways were from that conversation.
Yeah, I got Seth as he was sort of breathlessly coming off of stage and wading through a sea of delegates who were busy to shake his hand and hand him a business card. So he almost seemed relieved by the time he got into the studio, which is not usually the case. People are often quaking in their boots by the time I get to grill them. But I'm joking. It was good. We covered a few different things. I think, like with MLS, one of the I think I'm going to start at the end, because really, like the last question I asked him, something I'm most interested by, because I asked him whether or not other people are coming up to him and MLS in general and asking about their approach of selling all of their rights to one single media entity. I think people it's almost forgotten that Apple have those rights worldwide. They've got every single game, all the local markets, and that's a model that's not been seen all that much. A few years ago, I remember discussing this kind of thing with Phil Carling at Octagon, and he was talking about basically how one of the tech companies should buy all of a property, all of the Premier League, not just the broadcast rights, but all the advertising, everything, because they've actually got the capability to do something with it. And this is the closest example we've got to that. And what he said about that was that I think it started a lot of conversations. I think it started a few people are now coming up to him being like, because it's different to that OTT model, your sort of D2C model where you're making it all yourself. They've gone to that partner. They work with IMG on the production side. So they've got different stakeholders who are working on their specialist areas. They're not taking everything in on themselves. So they've still got that, but they are working with a massive tech company, a brand that has the ability to get into every home potentially worldwide with an internet connection if they really wanted to. So yeah, that for me was a really interesting part of that conversation. And he said it's definitely increasing that level of interest in that type of deal.
And I'm not surprised, right? I think it's probably out of all deals I can think of in the marketplace, probably the one I'm most interested in, really, because it's a long-term deal. You have the biggest tech company basically in the world on board with you at a relatively marginal investment year on year. But this sounds might sound a bit cliche to say, but like basically, if Apple wants you to be successful, they can make you successful. They have so many people engaged. Literally, they're in every other person's pocket in the world. Basically, they can dial up or dial down the presence and awareness of the MLS depending on how they want it to. The question is about the MLS as a product, though, that a lot of eggs now, that whole, say, Messi bubble now seems to be, I don't want to say it's bursting, but it's certainly losing a bit of air because of also this conversation around his injuries and what he's been doing from an exhibition perspective. So it's just interesting to see if they can keep that momentum, if they can turn the story now a bit away from Messi about how high quality the on-pitch stuff can be, that fans are going to start flocking to subscribe. But ultimately, Premier League's still a real hot property in the US, so it's still not the number one football or soccer offering in that market. And there's almost a tribalism that exists at a Premier League level because of the way they've been able to carve out their own time slots as well. I don't know. I've been in the US a number of times where the Saturday morning you go to pubs and bars and they're bursting with people early in the morning because it's a thing. It's become all part of the experience. They have to break that and then push themselves into the number one slot. And obviously they do that, then we've seen the value of what the Premier League rights have grown to in the US being pretty significant numbers. We're talking a couple of billion, I think, for the cycle of the latest deal, if I remember correctly. So that's what they got to aspire to. But Apple is a very close shop with reach. They have got, the Apple TV product it does exclude certain audience base. There is quite a strong user of Android users across the globe. Some mark as Android's number one, not in the US, but indeed they're so significant that they do risk that they make it more difficult, even if it's a perception wise, even if they make it accessible through different means, that they're putting in eggs in a basket that is not on a platform that is not number one. And I think that's always going to be a bit of a challenge, but maybe that doesn't matter to them that much. The US is their holy grail. They don't really need to worry about non-US markets that much. If Messi allows them to filter into others organically and give them exposure without having to put a lot of effort in, that might be enough for them to grow internationally. I don't know. What do you think in terms of the international thing? Do you think the Messi component of this is enough to drive audiences to a sports property like theirs?
So one of the things we talked about was actually creating, does Messi create a kind of two-tier level of the competition? So you have your interest in Messi games, and then you have your interest in the rest of the MLS. And I mean, Seth's line on this was that essentially they are ahead of where they expected to be in terms of subscriber numbers and user data. Their KPIs on this, they're ahead of where they expect. They were ahead of where they expected to be, and then Messi arrived and it boosted them up further. And I guess I didn't get the answer to the question of whether or not you are creating that two-tier thing. But if you look at games where Messi's played in, and there are, I don't know, I think last year there was potentially one where maybe it was 1 million viewers. I could be completely misremembering that, but it was a very significant number anyway. And then there are probably games that are on that platform that are dwindling in the tens of thousands, in terms of viewers. Is that really healthy? I don't know. Does that grow a league? I don't know. Messi's only going to be there for a certain amount of time. I did see, in terms of the international stuff, I did see they were doing some interesting things with the way they're using generative AI around for different language commentaries and things like that. They're trying to build into to expand that reach there. So yeah, I think Messi will be a rising tide that lifts the boats for a little while, but it's what happens when he's gone. Maybe by then Apple and MLS will have figured this out. They'll have got their marketing. They've figured out exactly who they're trying to target and where the next level of growth comes from. But it does seem like Messi is the latest in the line of major international stars that have moved to MLS to have this big impact and be transformative. Maybe he could be Beckham level transformative, because he certainly did move the needle in that regard. You think he's probably already been more he's probably offered the league opening more than a Zlatan or a Steven Gerrard did when they came in and really didn't do very much at all. But it is kind of, how long will that last, and is it a rising tide, or is this simply a bit of a rain shower which will peter out?
Yeah, one of the things I do like about the MLS deal with Apple is the fact they are offering to all season ticket holders to have access to the platform, which, in theory, most of the season ticket holders will be at the grounds. So they probably wouldn't access it, but it's a nice touch because that's their core audience, and give it some value add for a change rather than trying to target those people to spend even more money on the platform. But yeah, I think you make some good points. I think they need something else to come to the mix. I think they need another spark from somewhere. I'm trying to work out, getting in my crystal ball, who would be the next big star to come and add some impetus in the mix. Someone with a global appeal, and
to me, it would have to be like either someone with someone with global appeal or someone with massive local appeal. So Pulisic, for example, who has been refound his form after joining AC Milan. Funny enough, speaking to the guys at Serie A, they are all about the fact that this is Serie A USA, so obviously there's the way they do their marketing, but they are all about the fact that they've got US stars there. They like, those guys are a big deal. Like Pulisic is a big deal. Like he's inherited basically the Landon Donovan title of being the biggest name in the US men's national team. But there are some other big name players too that could potentially do that. But it's probably having someone that's been successful overseas and then come back and is it could be a draw. I think is maybe the next shoe that needs to fall for them.
Yeah, it's a good example. I think actually Serie A is a pretty sneaky good deal with ESPN in place, and obviously they were at the New York event, and we actually had a little event at their offices in and around
some
Manhattan.
Great pizza, Nick.
Great. Of course, I would expect nothing less than from the Italian league, but my interesting thing about the Pulisic example versus like a Messi example is not, obviously they have different scales of fandom and followers, but you look at someone, the Pulisic in the US, yes, he would be great to attract an audience of US football, soccer fans, but a Messi brings in, there's obviously such a huge like Latino community and Mexican community in markets like the US, that if you can bring someone like a Messi who has that global stardom, that is when they can finally start pulling audiences that wouldn't be interested in perhaps following the MLS generally if they had the right play. Just, hey, we want to follow Messi. I just might have more of a pull, I suppose, than someone else. So like the obvious one for me jumps out is if Ronaldo gets bored out in Saudi and they want to tear up his contract, or he's sick of taking a few $100 million a year, or whatever the price tag is, that would be a great little rivalry for a year or two to lean into, right? With Ronaldo popping up in the US I don't know, he'd definitely be a New York guy, wouldn't he? Probably pop up in New York somewhere, or maybe LA. I could definitely see.
I can see him LA. Yeah. Actually, in that Galaxy kit, the white kit with the sash across it. Yeah, it depends. Yeah, I think it depends on probably how invested Saudi Arabia is in him. It's probably the best way of phrasing that. Whether or not he goes over. But I feel like he maybe partly wouldn't want to go just because the fact that Messi went there first. But I mean, another one is like a Neymar, a big Brazilian player.
Yeah.
Someone who can bring in like that audience. Because I don't generally think that you're really ever going to see MLS have a massive audience in Europe. Like the eyeballs just aren't going to turn over to that football, whereas they might well turn up from south to north if you got enough of that. If you made MLS the destination soccer property for the Americas, where the money and the sophistication was, that as an avenue would, I think, work better from like just a logistical basis.
Well, the one other problem they've got with Messi is the fact that I didn't realize I'd be talking about Messi so much on this, but we are talking about the MLS. Is what he lacks is, he's not an English native speaker in a hyper active media market like the US, and they really need someone who's really good in front of the camera, charismatic. English native speaker would be ideal. Has to be one of the best players in the world. If they can get that person, I'm not even sure who it is, because I follow the Jamaican Premier League these days, but that's not quite the same level of quality as the EPL. If they can find that type of person, maybe it is a Pulisic, maybe there's someone else that can even be another rung higher that has the stardom, the charisma, basically the Beckham factor, let's say, that they had. Like, they need that type. Then I think that would be the great, like the complement to a Messi, which is the on-star. I mean, he's got everything behind him, which is more than that, but he doesn't have that US media brand that Messi still hides away a little bit because he's still not comfortable in front of the camera speaking English, right? So anyway, we'll have to see my recipe there of a player. Anyone jump to mind, Tom, that stands out? I'm not really good with my football
US market, English language speaker, like charismatic from South America-ish, or maybe Central. I mean, like basically you want like a kind of Chicharito Mark II, like it really in their prime is that kind of guy, or like a there's no player that sticks out in particular, but maybe a sort of Latino-born US men's national team star who can bring up those eyeballs in the South, but also has that major pull in front of the cameras. It is a struggle. There isn't really that kind of profile of player there right now, and I mean. Moving mountains to get Messi was probably one thing too. It's how much more have they got left in the tank when it comes to that kind of thing.
Well, Neymar would be a great get. I think he'd definitely bring the star power, but don't know how solid he's on the English front. But anyway, let's we can keep speculating. And if anyone has any ideas, do reach out to me on who that big star draw card would be to give the MLS the next injection of excitement and momentum that they need. But right, this is probably a good time to hand things over, Tom, to you. Speaking to Seth Bacon.
Let's hear it. Seth Bacon, welcome to SportsPro New York. How was your session?
It was good. It was a lot of good conversation. It's amazing how you had someone there who owns a team, someone from a technology company. We're at the rights holder side from the league level. We're all focused on the same thing, right? It's all how the world is shifting. It's all about how you integrate into the ecosystem and provide more value for fans. And it's about how you drive ultimately more revenue. So it's interesting the lens everyone takes on it, but we're all having the same conversation.
And I guess probably the most natural place for us to take this conversation is to talk about the MLS deal with Apple. Yeah. You're entering year 2 of that. How did you find out? What was the experience like in year 1? Was it as expected? And what can we expect to see changing as the deal evolves and the relationship evolves, I guess?
Yeah, I guess there's 2 ways to answer year 1, right? Year 1, the first answer is it blew the doors off any projections we had, expectations we had. We were so far ahead of our targets at the middle of the year last year, and we were really, really pleased. And then Messi showed up, and that really just sort of supercharged everything. We ended up, double where we thought we'd be from a subscriber standpoint. The viewership, millions of people tuning into our biggest games. It was a huge, huge success for us. The product looked excellent. The picture quality, all of those things. So we're really pleased. Our owners were pleased. Apple was pleased, which is always important when you're in a partnership. So really, really successful. The other way to answer it is it was a lot of work. There's a lot that went into it. We had a lot of people. We signed the deal in July of 22, and that was, sort of not the finish line, but just getting to a new starting line of building a production entity, having the product ready to launch, thousands of hours of content in the platform when it launched. So there was a lot that we had to do to get ready. And then we were sort of holding on for dear life during the season and understanding how, the production world reacted and things you had to adjust to and think about that maybe we hadn't thought of before because our production was handled by our rights partners. The scheduling, the promotion, all of those things, the platform itself. And, we've learned a lot. And this year has been a really good progression for us to be way more in front of things, understand where the challenges might be, where the opportunities are, where the successes will be. So it's been a really good learning curve for us. We're super psyched about year 2, and we're off to an even bigger start than we were last year.
And what are some of those opportunities that you mentioned there? What are they that you're looking to tap into this time around, having kind of maybe set your feet in that first year?
Yeah, I think first of all, we're on the production side. We're looking at new ways that we can add a whole bunch of new, whether it's features or programming changes. We've tweaked our announcers, right? Who the talent are, things like that from a production standpoint. But then a lot of things about how we talk to fans, how we target fans. We're getting much smarter with that, and we have better data to to work against to make sure that we're really focused with our messaging. Awareness is something we're really, really focused on, because you would think, in our industry, of course, everyone knows Apple and Season Pass, but there's still a lot of people out there that we have to get to explain that this is a thing and this is something that they should be part of. And I think understanding that you can't always just walk in and hit someone right over the head with a subscription message versus, hey, MLS is here and MLS is really cool to watch and it's got the biggest players in the world and, it's a really valuable product. Giving people the reason to watch and then walking them into the sale of the subscription. That's some of the nuance that we're focused on this year, is how we focus on awareness, focus on subscriptions, but really what's powering all that is why watch? And it's because it's the most exciting soccer in the world.
And some of those techniques, is that, say, a weekend of free streaming, all games access, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the past, what we did is we had a whole bunch of games free every single weekend. We've consolidated that. So on a regular weekend, there's less free games. But this past weekend, every game was free. So we've got 6 times during the year where we're going to focus. We're going to have these free all access moments. And we sort of understand what those are as we go. Those aren't predetermined what they'll be. 6 is a number that we sort of put as a target for ourselves, and we'll flex in and out of that, working with Apple very closely. But it's a way that we want to make sure that people know, hey, I'm going to tune in, I've got access to it, and you're going to see, really, really sharp pictures, really well-produced games, exciting soccer. The soccer so far, just the number of goals have been scored in stoppage time. We should probably look at it. It's got to be some sort of record. It's unbelievable. Some of these games that are getting tied or won in the kind of the end of the game. It's something that the unpredictability of Major League Soccer is a selling point for us. So it's working.
That's the sort of the sort of performance on field side of it. When it comes to that relationship with Apple, is there stuff that they want you to perhaps align with too? So they might say, "Oh, we've got this thing going on this weekend. It'd be great if you guys could stick your free slate on." Is that how the two-way relationship works?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the production is absolutely a partnership, right? I keep going back to production because it is the most visible thing that we do together, right? Is those matches and when people tune in for our studio shows or our live matches. So we're talking all the time about Apple Vision Pro, right? How are we integrating that? One, to promote the launch of the product, but also, we're the first league that's had a film, I'm using air quotes right now, a film for that new immersive experience that's coming out very soon, and it really does take you into our sport in a new and different way, and you can see the speed of the game in a much different way, and we're working with them very closely on how that ultimately manifests itself in the first live game in that experience, which I'm not sure if you've done it yet, if you've been able to put a headset on, but
not yet.
It is their ability to use technology to, there's other immersive headsets and they're really good and my kids use them, but this one takes you deeper where you really become encased in these experiences and you're transported to another place. Like you're watching Major League Soccer in a movie theater and you can move rows. You want to sit in the front row or the back row on the left side or the right side. And it's a way that you can experience things in such a different way. And we're lucky because the partnership with Apple, we're embedded in Vision Pro from the start. And we're the only league that has all of our live content in that platform right now. So it's ways like that. We work together all the time on what are the things, and it works both ways, right? What are the things important to us, and how are we pushing those through the product as well?
Is there anything that you can kind of give us a little hint on that we might be seeing in that Vision Pro field with MLS content coming out soon?
Yeah, look, I think the live game is the thing that's really kind of the goal that we're trying to work to. There's a lot of testing happening. They're at our matches all the time. So that's the thing we're most focused on is how we get there. And then, understanding how people are using the platform. Apple, I'm certain, will be, always focused on things that they can do to enhance the user experience on their platforms, is what they do so well and have for so many years. And we'll work with them to make sure that it's authentic in the way it comes across for Major League Soccer, right? Because the action on the field is really exciting, but that's not the whole experience for an MLS match. It's what's happening in the stands. It's what's happening, around the game. There's a lot that makes Major League Soccer tick.
One of those things I'd like to kind of go into is the new Apple app as well. This Apple Sports app. It was when it came out, the announcement was sort of vague as to what it's going to do. What's its role for MLS? Is it a kind of a discovery tool?
Yeah, it's absolutely a discovery tool, I think. And you know, Apple's design and the things they do are so impressive. And there's times when you look at something like when that app first comes out and you say, oh, I get it. It's a scores app. But the way that it integrates with your phone, if you activate all of the pieces in there, and it can be giving you scores constantly from your lock screen and pushing notifications to you, that's a huge discovery tool for us, right? And the ability to then see that on your phone and say, hey, this game is starting or this game is close. You click on it and it takes you straight into the stream, right? There's not a, hey, if you want to stream this with other leagues, if you want to stream this, go here, and then you have to log in somewhere. You click it and you're straight in and you're watching the match. That's the integration. That's the piece that we're really focused on with Apple, and that's how, you know, we're gonna win ultimately, is because we've got these new and different ways that we can push content to people.
One of the things that the NBA did a few years ago with this is sort of micropayments to get into games. Is that something that you see you'll be doing from the Apple Sports app? You
know, Apple sells more subscriptions than anyone on the planet, and we're going to work with them closely. I don't know that kind of micro transaction is something that we're focused on right now. It's something, you know, what we're focused on is how do we get people to commit to a season, right? We don't sell by the game right now. And how do we make sure that we've got, you know, the SKUs in place that people can take advantage and sign up, whether it's on a monthly basis, an annual basis. There's price drops that happen throughout the course of the season. And we're confident in the model we have right now. And we're especially confident because we've got Apple helping lead the way, and this is what they do really well.
You mentioned that Messi saw your numbers all go boom. Are you still kind of trending ahead where you want to be? Are you way ahead of where you want to be? What's that journey looking like?
Yeah, well, I'd say we're way ahead of where we want to be. You know, this time last year, we were where we are right now compared to last year at this point in the season. We're exponentially ahead of where we were, and that's natural because there's more people that we're able to roll over in renewals. But the interest is absolutely grown, right? The Messi effect helps drive interest not only with subscribers, but people who want to partner with us to help drive subscriptions. And it's showing up in all the other metrics too, as far as ticket sales, consumer products. And it's got, the good news is it's got a ripple effect that it's not just the Miami games that are showing the success and the growth. It's all the games. Our season start from a viewership standpoint and an attendance standpoint was much higher than it has been in the past. And it's in places where, you know, we've had clubs that in the past might have had 10,000 people at their home opener, and now they have 30,000 people at their home opener. And that's not messy there. It's just the interest and the way we're presenting and thinking about how to market the sport is growing. And that's only beneficial to everyone involved.
I saw some reports that you guys were some of your games last year were averaging more than 1 million viewers, which I think is probably significantly higher than what you were getting previously with your previous broadcasters. And I'm assuming those were probably Messi games. Is there a concern that you're creating a bit of a two-tier league in terms of interest? I know you mentioned it there. There's a bit of a filter down, but if you've got such high numbers for one thing, if that one thing isn't there anymore, is that a problem?
Look, our jobs and our responsibility is with this opportunity with Messi being here is how do we take people who come because they're interested in Messi or curious about Messi and convert them, right? We want people to come and say, hey, you know what? I showed up at an event or I tuned into an event because I wanted to see Messi, but well, that game was really exciting and had a lot of goals and a lot of late action, or that fan experience was great and I had a great time with my friends or with my family. That's what we need to do, right? We've got the greatest player ever played the game, and there's a responsibility on our part to make sure that we take advantage of that, because that nothing lasts forever, right? So what we want to do is make sure that we continue to use moments like having Messi in the league, all the international and global events that are coming to the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and really use those as catalysts for even more growth, right? The idea of it's not, is this what's going to put soccer on the map? Soccer is way on the map in the United States, right? And the growth that we see in the investment from Apple, the investment from our sponsors, Adidas, et cetera, like we're here, right? It's not a conversation anymore. Now the conversation needs to be, how big is the potential growth? And we think it's limitless.
Sort of continuing on from that slightly, with the 2026 World Cup coming up, are you guys already planning for how you're going to take advantage of that?
Oh, yes. There's a lot of work being done on what does 2026 look like. We're working at the league level. We're working with our clubs, working with venues. There's a lot of conversations that are happening because it is such an important moment for the league, right? This is, we talk about it as an injection of rocket fuel, right? And it's not a destination for us. It's how do we take all the growth we have now and just use that to exponentially grow what we do. And we're confident that we've got the right people and we'll have the right plan in place to make sure that we take advantage of that.
One final question before I let you disappear. You're the first real big sports property to take all of your rights, everything, global, local, domestic, put it all into one platform. Have you had other leagues, other rights holders coming up to you and asking, what's that been like? Have you ever had people now more interested in that model than perhaps they were before?
Yeah, I've had a lot of conversations with people at the rights level, at the media level, like a media partner level, just trying to understand it. And there's a lot of conversation around the decoupling of local rights, right? And how you can aggregate those. And it's, as I said earlier today, we have the benefit of being a single entity. So we have a little bit of a different ability to talk about and institute rule changes that affect rights and things like that. So there's a piece of that, but it also took, us seeing this coming and talking to people 5 years before it happened to really affect that change and convince people and our owners, who are terrific because they invest and they, more importantly, have the vision to see where that investment should go, were supportive. And we had a core group of owners that helped us from a media committee standpoint. And when we started talking about this, they were all in, and everyone was all in. It was a unanimous decision that this was the right path. So we're getting a lot of people asking us how it works and how it's working. And we've got nothing but good things to say about how it's working. Again, I think I said earlier, we're very, very bullish on the future. But it is something that takes a lot of work and a lot of coordination.
All right, Seth, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Before you go, myself and Nick would just like to thank you for tuning into this episode of Streamtime. If you found the episode insightful, please make sure you like and subscribe on whichever platform you listen to. As a growing podcast, we'd greatly appreciate your support in sharing or writing a review. Ultimately, we want this podcast to not only entertain you, but also hopefully help you navigate the digital sports landscape. If you have any feedback on previous episodes or any topics and speakers you'd like to hear from in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find myself and Nick Meacham on LinkedIn or on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @SportsProChris1. Nick can be found @SportsProNick. Of course, if you want to stay fully up to date on the sports business news cycle, please make sure to visit the SportsPro Media website or sign up to one of our several newsletters to make sure you don't miss anything. Once again, thank you, and we look forward to you joining us next week on the Streamtime podcast.